find the thing that works for you. And you have to try. You have to try different things. And I wasn't good in track when I first started running. I remember getting, like last place a time or two before I figured it out. And your body has to sort of learn to adapt. And you do have to practice. That was another thing. I was a lazy athlete. I was a really lazy athlete in high school. And I probably could have done so much better if I'd actually put more effort into it. And that's kind of why I started bike racing as an older person, because I thought, let's see what happens if I actually put some effort into it. But I think it's just really important to keep going, to keep trying, to keep working at it.
What's up? Welcome to another episode of Tomboy Stories. This series is all about humans sharing how they are actively using the life skills sports taught them. In this episode, Catherine's love for physical activity and adventure has remained a constant in her life, and she shares how discovering cyclocross in her 50s reignited her passion for competition. Stay tuned to hear Catherine's story, and please hit that subscribe and follow button. Can you tell us your earliest sports memory or, first sports experience?
Yeah. I grew up as a really skinny, scrawny, really skinny kid. In fact, I got to my height of 5'6" at age, 12 or so. And I was maybe 80 pounds. But as a kid, I had either the misfortune or luck of, I have two brothers and no sisters. And then we lived next door to four boys, and they were varying ages, all athletes though. And so I kind of grew up around being one of the boys. And back in those days, there was a lot of, my mom was kind of prim and proper, and she used to say, girls don't do that stuff. I heard that a lot. And usually that just made me more adamant about doing whatever. So, you're around four boys, they're daring you to climb the tallest tree and see how far you can jump across that creek to see if you can make it. And, can you ride your bike through the ditch and all that stuff. And I started out just being a skinny, scrawny, really awkward, shy, introverted kid who had no confidence, and just hanging out with those guys. And doing, guys are so athletic and so physical anyway, and doing all the stuff that I did with them, riding my bikes, climbing trees, running races, and also back in my day when I was a kid growing up, we played things like, kick the can and hide and go seek and tag. And we'd be out there in the summertime until it got dark. And I became an athlete just because I wanted to play with those kids, and just because I was around those guys. And it was a matter of sticking up for myself. And I learned that I could run fast, and I learned some confidence. And I actually started entering races as a little kid. They had I don't know what they're called, junior Olympic trials, I think, or something like that. I lived in a small town in Indiana. It was really, way down there on the lower level for racing, but I started running like sprints and stuff. And I wasn't very good when I was in, third or fourth grade, but I got better and better. And especially just having that environment of being around a bunch of boys who were physical and active. And, I got to the point where I'd come home, every other day, bleeding, cut, scraped, broken bones, whatever. And my mom would just kind of be like, oh, here's the Band-Aid. Oh, clean yourself up. You'll be fine. And I was, and I learned to just you just shrug it off and you're like, okay, go back out there again tomorrow. So that's my earliest recollection.
You just got to toughen up. You're like, I got to survive, and you have fun in the midst of it.
Yeah. And you can't, go cry, because they'd all tease you and be like, oh, you're a sissy. And so, if you were really hurt, like if I was really hurt, my brother would step in and, kind of be a big brother. But you can't just cry about everything. You just like wipe your tears and get back in there.
That's right. That's right. So
Yeah.
are there any other, I mean, I love the fact that I wish more kids still kind of played outside, but what other sports did you do other than, just the regular kid things? Are there any organized sports or recreational sports that you play?
Yeah. I'm 63. So I was around when Title IX was approved. And I happened to be going into ninth grade when that happened. And I remember it really well because I'd been playing with those boys, since I was little. And it was really interesting because as I went through puberty, which was right around, 12, 13, 14, I got really fast. And I remember one summer I had been running with the boys, and these guys they're all like over 6 feet tall now as grown-ups. They're all tall guys. And they're fast. And I remember that the one summer going through puberty and racing the boys, and I got really fast. And then I went into ninth grade and I thought, I'm going to go out for track because, I can catch all those boys that I live next door to. And so I started running track, and in ninth grade, I started running track, and I did hurdles and sprints. And this is one of those life lessons that when you look back on it, you're like, and I think my dad probably sat me down and had to talk about it too, but I was running against seniors. And I remember doing hurdles, and one of my first races, I beat this senior woman who thought she was really fast, and she was mad at me. And here I'm like, what are you, when you're in ninth grade, you're like 13 or 14, and I was kind of like, oh, sorry. And and I went home and I told my dad, and it's one of those life lessons. It's like, don't ever apologize for being good. You go shake their hand, you congratulate them for doing a good job too, and you be a good sport, but don't ever apologize for being good, because that is not what sports is about. It's about winning and trying your hardest. And that was one of the things that really stuck with me. But I also did gymnastics. I was a cheerleader, and but track was always my favorite. I loved it. One other great story about track. In high school, I raced track all through high school. And again, small town Indiana, Kokomo, Indiana. I beat most everybody in our little, I don't know, circuit that we raced. But there was one girl I couldn't beat, and she was at the city school, the Kokomo City School. She probably is 6 feet tall. And her brothers were all like serious basketball players, really good athletes. And I could never beat her. She's barely like stepping over the hurdles. And I really tried, but I came close, and I set my best times when I raced against her. And when I was in college, and I was always frustrated because I couldn't beat her. When I was in college, I got a letter from my mom, and she sent me a newspaper clipping, and she said, I thought this might make you feel better. And it was a newspaper story saying that Judy Brown went to the Olympics, and she got a bronze and a silver medal in hurdles. And I was like, okay, I feel better. And, she made me better too. And, you can't always win all the time. But the thing that I always thought was important is when you race with someone who is really, really good, they make you try harder and harder to get there. So I think they bring you up too.
That is awesome. And I feel like, is it a small world? Judy Brown Clark, is that who you're talking about?
Yes.
Wow. Yeah, I know her. She also set the record at my high school.
That's wild.
Yeah, so East Lansing High, and she was like my hurdle coach my senior year in high school.
Oh my God,
knees were jacked up, but yeah, I love that small world.
You know what? I'm originally from Flint, Michigan.
Are you sweet?
Yeah.
Okay, that's awesome. Well, yeah, I love when that happens. Small world.
Oh,
Really.
that is super cool.
It's sweet. So, I mean, you spoke on just the lessons of, I mean, I love the fact that you're like, don't apologize for winning. I think that's one thing that, especially our young girls, being able to kind of get that in there, like, don't apologize for being great. But
Yeah.
what are the lessons that you kind face, with all your experiences as an athlete?
I think the biggest one is, and this is one of the things that I think being an athlete teaches you, is never giving up and having that just that inner spirit and that will to keep pushing through. And it's like I recently used to be a bike racer. Like at age 50, I started bike racing and I did cyclocross, which was my favorite. And it's basically, you're doing multiple sprints on a bike and jumping over stuff. It was kind of like, you got hurdles and everything else in that kind of bike race. But I got to the point where it's like, this is painful. This is really, really hard to do. And no matter how good a shape I was in, and I got up to the national level, just working my butt off. And no matter how good a shape I was in, the first 10 minutes of every cyclocross race, no matter how warmed up I was, my brain was like, drop out, you're going to die, you're going to pass out, you're going to stop, you got to stop. And I would just be like, it's like, it was kind of like two people. Here's one say, drop out, you're going to die, this is really hard, this is terrible. And over here, I got this little angel saying, no, just stick in there, just stick it out. All you got to do is finish the race, just stick it out. And they're like 45 or 50-minute races. And, and I'd always think, okay, all I got to do is stick it out. And, of course I would end up in like first or second or third place. And it's like, I didn't just stick it out, I actually did well. So, having that little person on your shoulder saying, just stick it out, just keep pushing through it, is so important. And I think that when you're an athlete, or when you even start to get into sports, having that, and I think it sort of builds that into you too, it's sort of that survival instinct. You just want to keep pushing through, because it's like, I can't give up, I got to keep going. And I've always thought that your will to win is kind of just like a survival instinct. It's kind of primal. When we were cavemen, we were running away from a saber-toothed tiger, and now it's trying to cross the finish line first. But the first person who can get away from the saber-toothed tiger's in good shape. It's the second person that's not. So I think it's just, it's a survival skill. So I think that is like super important. And the other really big thing that for me, it was massive. And it even helped, just recently when I started bike racing again, is the confidence. I mean, I went from the shy, nerdy kid in school, grade school and high school, to and I remember sitting in class, I think it was art class or something, when they did the announcements on the speaker, and they'd say, they'd announce the track meet, and they'd say, and congratulations to Catherine Ebling, or I was Marks then, different name, but congratulations, because she got first in the hurdles, or her relay team won, or whatever. And I'd at first be, I'm probably turning red and embarrassed, like, oh, they're talking about me. But walking out of class, you got people high-fiving you and coming up and saying, great job. I mean, you stand up straight, you walk a little taller down the hall, and you kind of are like, I'm badass, no one can mess with me. And it's a whole like mindset change. And I think that is the biggest thing for me, is that confidence builder. And you don't have to win a race. It's just like, I got up and did it. I put that effort out. I have a strong body. And I think that is so valuable for everybody.
That is so true. I mean, even just finishing finishing the line is something that you're like, oh gosh, I finished something.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So is there any advice that you would give to that young, scrawny, nerdy girl that you grew up? Is there anything that you would tell her now, looking back, of like, just look at where we are now?
Yeah. When I was the scrawny, nerdy girl, I didn't get chosen for the baseball team. I didn't get chosen for like the kickball team, because they're all looking at me like, whoa, she could blow away. But, don't give up. Find the thing that works for you. And it's you have to try. You have to try different things. And I wasn't good in track when I first started running. I remember getting, like last place a time or two before I figured it out. And your body has to sort of learn to adapt. And you do have to practice. That was another thing. I was a lazy athlete. I was a really lazy athlete in high school. And I probably could have done so much better if I'd actually put more effort into it. And that's kind of why I started bike racing as an older person, because I thought, let's see what happens if I actually put some effort into it. But I think it's just really important to keep going, to keep trying, to keep working at it. Again, I have another little story about my son. My youngest son was an incredibly fast sprinter. We were in St. Louis then, and he started out doing the grade school track meets. And I remember one of his first ones. We're sitting there, and he did the track meet, and they ran it in heats. And I think they just looked at the heat time. I can't remember if they did a finals or not, because they had so many people. So we're just kind of hanging out, waiting for the results. And he was like pouting and like throwing his shoes around. And he's like, I did terrible. I did terrible. And they called out the results, and he got second. And they said, Dan, you got second. And so, it's like, don't think you did terrible. Just keep working at it. And he ended up pursuing track in high school and becoming a record setter. And he had so many chances for things like scholarships and everything else. You have to find what works for you, but you have to also stick with it. It may not be easy. It may not always be fun, but if it lights a little fire inside you somehow, it's worth doing. And it matters so much in everything else you do in your life. It gives you confidence. It gives you this feeling like I can handle anything that comes my way. Another example of that is my boyfriend and I do a lot of world travel, and he's involved with environmental stuff and rivers. So a lot of times we'll travel to wild places and do whitewater rafting trips. And one of the trips we just did 2 or 3 years ago was in Zimbabwe, and we went on the Zambezi River. And it is a class 5 river, and there's like crocodiles in there. So there's places where it's like our raft guy would be like, hold on to the boat, do not get out, don't think of falling in, don't think of swimming, because there's crocodiles here. And some of those rapids were like crazy, but I was like, I'm comfortable with myself. I know that if something happened, I would probably survive, and I could swim, and I could hang on tight. And at the end of the raft trip, this is a 3-day raft trip, we get ready to get out, and I'm looking up the side of a canyon that is, I don't know, 200 feet high or so, and it looked like it was straight up. And our raft guide says, this is where we're getting out. We got to climb up there. And he said, we'll carry the gear, don't worry. And it was so steep in spots you're basically vertically climbing. And they had I think they had ropes or little ladders in spots. But if you weren't a fit person, I don't think you could make it. There are things like that all the time. And our trips that it's like, oh, thank God I'm fit because I can handle this. But I think for anything, you don't have to be in some wild place. I think anything you do, if you've got the athletic ability, you can kind of handle what's coming at you.
No, that sounds like an amazing trip.
I got lots of those stories.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. Going vacationing with you guys sounds like a great time. So then I think brings us to a great next point. I mean, a lot of people, like you talking about your son, like after high school, a lot of people are kind of like, man, I'm done. I've done the sport thing. I'm kind of done. I may have been really good at it, but I've reached the peak of my existence. So how did you kind of put the mentality for yourself to, take on, being able to go on these adventures, like starting cycling? So what was that process like for you?
That was a big evolving process. I stayed home with my kids and raised 3 kids, and I stayed fit. I worked out at the gym, I lifted weights, I did a variety of things, but I never really did anything on a regular basis. And when my kids grew up, they're all pretty much in college or in high school. And then I went through a divorce, and I kind of thought I need to be around people that are positive minded and do something that makes me feel good. And I thought about it for a long time, and I thought, at my core, I'm still an athlete. I'm an athlete in my heart. And the thing that makes me feel best about myself is doing something athletic. And so I looked around and I noticed there were a few bike riding groups around, and some of them were pretty big. And I thought, okay, I'm going to go on some bike rides with these people. And they were a great group of people. They were fun, they were sociable. They're all into fitness and being healthy. And I really, really enjoyed it. And it was like sort of the dawn of my new life. And then I met some people while I was riding, and they'd be like, "You're pretty good at this. You should probably start racing." And I was like, "Really?" And they were like, "Yeah, you should probably race." And I thought, well, I always liked racing. I've always been kind of competitive. And so I started racing. And I remember my very first race, I was scared to death, and it was a crit. They're on a small course, usually about a mile to mile and a half, and they often go through like a city, and they block off streets. And you have to worry about things like manholes and grates on the street and hills and cars and things like that, cars parked. But I did it, and I had a good tutor who kind of showed me the course and told me what to do. I got second place only because I didn't know it was the end of the race. But it was such a confidence builder, and it was a beginning level race, but it was such a confidence builder. I was like, I didn't crash, I didn't make anybody crash, and I got second place. And it was something that was just like so fun. And again, it was a confidence builder, and I needed that at that point in my life. I was, kids had empty nest syndrome. I was going through menopause. I had just gotten divorced, and I needed something new and fun and confidence building. So this whole group of people and this bike racing thing became like my thing to do. And it changed my life. It really did. It made me step into a new positive part of my life.
Yeah, I mean, for the first time, I think that sounds like it was a great accomplishment right there. Second place, and you didn't crash. I think, yes, you should be very proud of it. So with the time that we have left, if you have a little time, let me know if you got a hard stop or anything. But I mean, I guess I'll kind of just open this up to if there's anything else that you just want to share on your experiences and just how sports have played a role in just who you've become today. And then we'll go ahead and do that outro part. But if there's anything else that you just want to add and share.
Yeah, I've learned that I can do anything that I set out to do. And I've learned that, you definitely have to put work into it. You can't just say, I want to win that race, and just sit there on the couch and think about it and use positive thinking. It doesn't work that way. But there was a big race in St. Louis, and I really wanted to win it. It's a very traditional race. It's in a traditional part of town. It's in the Italian part of town, and it attracts a ton of people. And it's a series of 4 races that they do over 4 days. And I said, I want to win one of those races. And this was the year before, and I actually got a coach. And I didn't just visualize winning the race. I did do that, but I also visualized I'm going to be out in the 95-degree heat, sweating my butt off, working out, doing intervals. I'm going to be out in the dark of the night. I'm going to be out early in the morning when it's not even light out. I'm going to be out working out. And you have to look at that as part of the process. But the coolest thing was I visualized the end of the race. And every time I was out sweating my butt off, or up at super early in the morning, like 4:30 in the morning, to go ride my bike, I visualized that race, and I visualized the feeling of crossing the finish line, and that just exhilaration and joy, and like I did it. I did that. And I actually would be out practicing and have tears in my eyes, because I felt it so much. And this makes me kind of my voice crack, but I have a friend who snapped a picture as I crossed the finish line as I was winning that race. And I remember that moment because I saw the finish line. I was ahead of everybody because I started sprinting, and the finish line was like 10 feet in front of me. And I just burst out crying because I was like, oh my God, this is exactly the way I visualized it. This is exactly what I was thinking all those times when I was working out and practicing. And it happened because I made it happen, because I put the work into it. But I think setting your sights on a goal is really big for athletes. And it helps keep you there, and it helps keep you doing those things like getting up at 4:30 in the morning, or working your butt off, or coming home to where you can hardly walk because your legs are shaking so much. But setting your sights on that goal and having something out there that you really, really want can really help you stay with it.
Oh man, that's an emotion that is hard to explain to people that haven't experienced it. But just knowing, I may have not experienced it in your shoes, but just knowing from my experience, I'm sitting here almost crying too. Like, oh my God, I know when when you finally you're able to see what you put the work in for. I mean, that's amazing. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. Wow.
Yeah, and this is a psychological thing, and I've heard it so much. I think there's a TED talk about it, that whenever you don't feel like you're not at your best, or you're not really confident, or if you have to go out in front of a crowd to speak or do something that you're nervous about, going like this and looking in the mirror will raise your confidence and make you feel strong and proud. And that's what you do when you win a race. You're like that, and you get up on the podium and you're like that, and it goes with that feeling of like, I'm a winner. And so I think this part of it, doing that without winning a race, you can still get that feeling, not quite the same, but still you can get that.
Beautiful. Yeah, I'm gonna start walking around with this all the time. Just be doing this all day. Yeah, that's so true. Oh wow. Yeah, that's exactly what people do. You think you watch the end of the final four, and everybody's got their hands up like that. It's the thing to do. I'm gonna have to find that TED talk. That's awesome.
No, I stopped racing. I don't know, it's probably been 8 or 9 years ago now. I realized that I wanted to travel a lot and do more things besides just practicing all the time and riding my bike. But I really miss the competition. I miss the fact that there's a goal, and you have something to strive for, and something that gets you, to me, it like gets me up in the morning, and it's like something to strive for and something to work for. Having a goal like that is just such a big thing. So I might go back to some kind of competition. I haven't figured it out yet, but I think that lights people up when you can start competing like that. I learned how to mountain bike after I started road biking. And mountain biking it's kind of scary at first, but after I learned it's like, well, this is just like when I rode with the boys next door, you kind of lose some of your fear. But one of the things I learned that really struck me, and it's so true, is that when you're mountain biking and you see a bunch of rocks or a rough spot that you have to get over and you're kind of scared about it, the thing that is most important that you do is pedal harder. You got to pedal harder and pedal faster to get over the rough spots. And you can't slow down. You can't stop. You can't just be scared of it, because you'll never get over it. The only way you'll get through the rough spots is going hard and fast. And I think it's so true for life. It's like you can't stop and say, I'm scared, I can't do it. And you might think that. You might have to stop for a minute and say, I'm scared, let me think about it. Then you get on your bike and you go hard and you go through it. And it's, again, it's like, I did it. And it's such a feeling of accomplishment. That was a big thing for me. I'm Catherine Cat Ebeling. A friend of mine told me that they wanted to shorten my name to Cat because it was easier to yell for me in a race. And this was my tomboy story. I hope you enjoyed it.